Good afternoon, everyone. Shalom. I'm Shosh Bedrosian, spokeswoman for the National Public Diplomacy Directorate here in the Prime Minister's office. I will take a few questions after a couple of very brief points to share with you. Make sure you put your questions inside of the chat of this Zoom with, of course, your name and your outlet. It is Wednesday, October 15th, and today is day 740 since our hostages were brutally kidnapped into the Gaza Strip by barbaric terrorists. All of our living hostages are home. They not only survived October 7th being kidnapped by jihadi terrorists, but they survived 738 days of brutal captivity. They are survivors of hell, and they have now been given a second chance at life. Prime Minister Netanyahu has envisioned their return for 2 years. The day to see our hostages in the hands of our heroic IDF Special Forces, the day they were able to feel their loved ones' embraces again, the day where our hostages can finally start the process of physical and mental rehabilitation. The Prime Minister has heard their families' cries, he has seen their pain, and of course, he has felt their anguish to get their loved ones back home. It's a promise the Prime Minister made from the beginning. It's a promise that was delivered on Monday and continues until the rest of our hostages are back home. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Mrs. Sarah Netanyahu visited 5 of our released hostages last night at Beilinson Hospital. They are Avi Natan Or, Alon Ochel, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Evyatar David, and Eitan Mor. I watched with my own 2 eyes the Prime Minister embrace these 5 men and their families, sitting with each one to hear their stories of survival. Now, one of the released hostages thanked the Prime Minister for all that he's done to get him back home, and that he was happy that all of the hostages were released at one time in this deal, explaining to the Prime Minister it was the right thing to do rather than leaving any hostage behind. The Prime Minister told each returned hostage that the people of Israel waited for each one of them to come home, and that their families did not give up this fight, and neither did he. He also made it clear that the mission is not complete yet, as Israel is committed to bringing back all of the fallen hostages that are still being held inside of the Gaza Strip. So far, Hamas has released the remains of 7 of our hostages in batches over the last few days, with 21 more bodies of our hostages held in the Gaza Strip. The released hostages who came home in batches, their remains: Guy Iluz, Bipin Joshi, Yossi Sharabi, Captain Daniel Peretz, Uriel Baruch, Staff Sergeant Tamir Nimrodi, and Eitan Levy. May their memories forever be a blessing. Hamas also released another body overnight, and after going through the proper identification process at the Forensic Institute in Yafo, it is confirmed the body is not of a hostage. We stand clear when we say this. Hamas, the terror organization, is required to uphold its commitments to the mediators and return all of our hostages as part of the implementation of this agreement. We will not compromise on this, and we will spare no effort until our fallen hostages return, every last one of them. Hamas agreed to release all 48 of our hostages in phase 1 and made the specific confirmation to President Trump, and we are expecting to see the terror organization uphold their side of this agreement. Now, all 28 of our hostages whose bodies were held in the Gaza Strip should have come home alongside the living hostages that were released. They were all alive on October 7th before Hamas stormed our southern border and massacred kibbutzim, cities, and a music festival. But they were either killed on that horrific day or they were murdered in captivity. The families of hostages whose loved ones remain inside of Gaza explained to the Prime Minister and President Trump on Monday in a meeting before their addresses to the Israeli Knesset that returning their loved ones' remains will save the lives of their family, as they will then have the opportunity to provide a proper Jewish burial, allowing their loved one to finally rest in peace. President Trump arrived in Israel on Monday morning to mark this historical moment, the first day under this approved phase deal where our hostages came home. At that exact moment of his landing at Ben Gurion International Airport, the families of hostages began to reunite with their loved ones that were held in captivity for 2 years. 2 years. It's a moment 2 forces got us to. The commitment from Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. These are 2 forces that exude power, leadership, and promise. With the help from President Trump and his dedication and efforts, Prime Minister Netanyahu was able to fulfill his promise to bring everyone home. I'm going to take a few questions right now. Going through the questions right now. In the past, we've had a lot of questions that I've already said in the briefing, so I'm just going through them to make sure. Okay. So the first question from Israel Hayom: what is the nature of talks currently taking place in Egypt, and what are their status? In terms of the talks in Egypt, I can tell you, of course, this was just released the other day. Prime Minister Netanyahu was not there because of the holiday of Simchat Torah that started. From Joel Pollack from Breitbart News: one, is the Prime Minister's office concerned? Few of the hostage families have thanked the Prime Minister or the Israeli government for their help in releasing the hostages. In terms of that, this is a democracy. Anyone can say what they want. They can protest on the streets. That's the power of Israel, a Western civilization. And of course, there are so many families that have thanked the Prime Minister, President Trump, for getting to this point in time. It was through military pressure. It was through diplomatic pressure that got us to this point in time, with the two forces that I mentioned before, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, getting us to this point. We have crossed the line. Like I said, he met with hostages last night at Bellinson Hospital. I was there. I saw it with my own two eyes. I saw the Prime Minister and his wife embrace these families, talking to them, hearing and sitting with them for 20 minutes or more, just about their stories in captivity. All of them thanking him there for his support and making sure that he gets these hostages out. This is David Isaac from JNS. Could you comment on Hamas eliminating rivals in the Gaza Strip and how this might impact the Trump plan? This goes back to the Trump plan, which I'm glad you said, the 20-point plan. And the 20-point plan stands that Israel will make sure that Hamas is disarmed, that Gaza is demilitarized, and making sure that Gaza never poses a threat to the state of Israel again. And we are looking forward to this entire agreement being upheld. Going through the rest of the questions right now. This is Sharon Niza from Italian Daily, Il Foglio Italian Daily. How many humanitarian aid trucks is Israel entering in Gaza so far since the truce started? And from which crossings? I can tell you that humanitarian aid has never stopped going into the Gaza Strip. It's something Israel has been committed to since the start of this war, making sure that aid goes in and it gets to populations that need it most, ensuring that Hamas is not stealing the aid, which of course we have seen in the past far too many times. And we will continue to see that. In terms of questions, you can reach out to Kogat and the IDF for additional information. Just going through the rest of these questions here. There is a question from Nicholas from the Liberation. When does the Israeli government plan to allow journalists to independently access to Gaza? So in terms of our statement on Gaza right now, we know that hundreds of journalists have gone into the Gaza Strip. And of course, this office, the Prime Minister's office, has made that happen for several outlets across the world, from CNN, Fox News, AP, and Reuters. If you want to enter Gaza, you should contact the IDF directly. But in terms of additional information, I have not received any on that. We also want to let the press continue to realize we still have hostages inside of the Gaza Strip. That is the mission, that is the phase that we are in right now, to make sure all of our hostages, the remains of our hostages, are brought home at this point in time. Another question about the aid trucks that I responded to. And this is someone from a Japanese newspaper. Does the Prime Minister's office have any idea when the next hostage will be handed back from Hamas? We are expecting Hamas to uphold their side of this agreement. They agreed to release all 48 of our hostages. I mentioned the numbers in my briefing of where the numbers stand at this point in time. We are expecting all of our hostages to come back. Let's make that very, very clear. All of them will come back. And like I said, we are expecting Hamas to fulfill that obligation. And more questions about the bodies of our hostages and the execution of Gazans inside of the enclave that I already said, we go back to the 20-point plan. Israel stands firm by that, making sure that Gaza does not pose a threat to the state of Israel ever again, and making sure that Hamas never has an opportunity ever to govern the people of Gaza. Going through the questions one more time. I believe I answered all of them. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it.